But I don't believe that market solutions alone can power the national revival that we actually need in this country. Our inner animal spirit at the heart of the American soul, it has been domesticated, it has been tamed by this new culture that rejects truth and embraces relativism, that rejects equal opportunity and embraces equal results, that rejects excellence and embraces victimhood. That inner animal has left oceans to lift up places like China, while their culture of Maoist victimhood has leapt back in the other direction to hold us down. You know what I say? When we rallied behind the cry, many of us did, to make America great again, we did not just hunger for any single man. We hungered for the unapologetic pursuit of excellence in this country, because that is what it means to be American. Yep. I think this is an opportunity for the conservative movement, for the GOP in this country, to create a new American dream for the 21st century that revitalizes the ideals that set this nation into motion almost 250 years ago from places not far from where we're getting together here, right here in New Hampshire. I think it is an opportunity to revive basic ideas, the basic rules of the road, ideas like merit, the idea that you get ahead in this country, that you get into this country based on merit. I'll talk about getting ahead in this country. Let's even just talk about who gets in. Okay? My parents came to this country in the late 70s in my dad's case, in the early 80s in my mom's case, through the front door, legally. They followed the rules. They worked hard. They paid their taxes. They made sacrifices. They raised 2 kids in this country who each went on to found companies that went on to employ and help thousands of Americans. Okay? They taught us that hardship isn't the same thing as victimhood, that there is more to life than self-indulgence, that getting married, that creating a family does involve some level of sacrifice, but some sacrifices are worth making for something greater. We should want more immigrants in this country like my parents, but we have to embrace them by also acknowledging, and I say this as a first-generation American, that we cannot open our arms to a wave of immigrants whose first act of entering this country is a law-breaking one. Yeah. Because we are a nation of laws. That is part of what it means to be American. It's not just merit about who gets into this country. After you get in, it's about meritocracy in who gets ahead in this country. Embracing the idea that Martin Luther King was right. I think the GOP can be not only the party of Lincoln, but the party of MLK. Reviving our conviction in the idea that you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. Amen. What does that mean? Thank you. It means that we start by getting rid of racial discrimination in every form and every way in this country, and that includes when the Supreme Court overturns affirmative action in college admissions later this year, as I expect they will, that we take that movement to every sphere of American life. I'll tell you, the next president of the United States, I'll teach you something tonight that even I didn't know a year ago, until I started writing, I'm thick of writing books about this stuff and teaching it for my own self. I was ashamed I didn't know. Most of the spread of affirmative action in this country, like most bad things, I think, lay at the feet of the federal government, actually, in the United States. Executive Order 11246. Johnson-era executive order that says if you want to do business with the federal government, that you have to adopt race-based quota systems in your hiring practices. That encompasses from Google to Boeing to General Motors, companies that encompass over 20% of the US workforce is hired against the backdrop of racial quota systems created by None other than the US federal government itself. From Ronald Reagan to George Bush to Donald Trump, Republican presidents have had an opportunity to draw a line through that, but they said they weren't going to do it for fear of political backlash. I think we need a Republican president that, without fear, will say that we are the party of Martin Luther King, we will not tolerate federally mandated racial discrimination, and eliminate that executive order once and for all. This is not that hard. It's low-hanging fruit, it's easy, and it's the beginning of eliminating de facto racism in every other sphere of our lives. Not just anti-white racism or anti-Asian racism, which was where it begins, but a new wave of anti-black racism in this country like I haven't seen in my lifetime. Growing up as a kid in Southwest Ohio in the 1990s, the reason is there's no better way to fuel racism in this country than to take something away from someone else on the basis of the color of their skin. And so whether it's worried about anti-white racism, anti-black racism, or anything in between, we need to revive that pursuit of excellence over de facto racism in America through that idea of putting merit back into America itself.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me restore merit in government. I have a very clear view on what this means. It's a dream I have as a citizen, that the people who we elect to run the government are the people who actually run the government. That is not the case today. Okay, we have a federal bureaucracy that grows like a national cancer, metastasizing from one sphere of life to another, to an alphabet soup that grows to more letters than we have in the alphabet, from the FTC to the SEC to the DOJ to the FAA, now delegating its dirty work to a new alphabet soup of ANZN, MSFT, FBGOOG. It is a government industrial complex that actually runs the show today. You know what I say is that if you're the President of the United States, elected by the people of this country, and you cannot serve for more than 8 years, I don't think most federal bureaucrats should be working for the federal government for more than 8 years. Civil service protections. I run companies, okay? I'll tell you this. If you tell me one of my employees works for me, but that I can't fire them, you know what that means? That means they don't work for me. It means I work for them. It means I am their slave. Because you have to take responsibility for what they do without having any influence over what actually happens. It is a myth, and yet that's the position the President of the United States is in today. Republican, Democrat, it does not matter. It is an illusion. It is a hollowed out husk of a constitutional democracy that we go through all the motions of casting the ballots if the guy we put in charge to run it, whether it's in the federal government, whether it's even at the state level, isn't even the person who's running the show. I've actually seen this in my travel in the states. I've been in the last 12 months, 12 to 18 months I'd say, been to a majority of US states in this country. Part of what I've been doing, part of my day job for the last year at Strive, is meeting with state pension systems. Okay, you want to talk about the deep state exists in the federal government, the deep state exists within the states too. I'll have a conversation with them. I'll say, okay, well, here's what your governor said, here's what your attorney general said, here's what the public elected officials of your state believe about how your dollars ought to be invested out of your pension fund system. What's your perspective on this? They say, we don't work for them. I said, well, who exactly do you work for? I never get a straight answer. Get a blank stare in the face. They view the publicly elected officials as some sort of nuisance, as some sort of inconvenience. Okay, the Democratic ones view them as a problematic inconvenience. The ones who self-identify as Republican view them as cute little puppets. But there's actually the real people running the show is this managerial class that pervades the public sector, the private sector alike. The same people who are the undersecretary of God knows what in the federal government, then come to the private sector to sit on a corporate board of director or be a vice president in some pharmaceutical company somewhere in the middle of a managerial bureaucracy in the private sector, to be the associate dean of God knows what at some university, pushing a DEI agenda and then getting some ambassadorship sitting in Austria. Okay, that is the managerial class that runs the show today in every sphere of our lives. And if we're going to dismantle the managerial class, it has to start with the federal government itself. And there's just a lot we can do as a conservative movement. Okay, there's a trick they play on you. The trick they play on you is that the more boring it sounds, the more it's supposed to put you to sleep so you're not paying attention. So I tell you what, they probably would have put you to sleep if you weren't awake to the reality that I'm telling you about. Think about this. Raise your hands in this room. I just want to see it. Okay. How many of you have heard impoundment prevention. Do those words mean anything to any of you? No. Not seeing a lot of hands up. Okay, I see one hand up. Thank you. JD, love it. Thank you. You're my hero. So this guy knows he knows where I'm coming from on this. So impoundment prevention. Okay, what does this say? It says that, let's say you're going to have a lot of presidential candidates waltzing through here, okay? They're going to think they're running for the highest office in the land. What are they running for? They're running for a hollowed out husk of a White House that they get to live in without realizing that they're just a puppet because there's a new one coming along in 4 years. Because you know what, if you're the president, you think you run the executive branch of the government. Not only can you not fire the people who work for you, you also actually have to, let's say there's an administrative agency that's spending money, and I don't want you to be spending that money, okay? Department of Education, God knows why this even exists, by the way, in the federal level. That's a discussion for another day. So, okay. First thing I want to do is I want to fire half the people. Can't do that. Okay. Now I want to shut you down. Well, there's some other civil service protection law that says that you can't do that. So, okay, at least I want to slash your budget in half. Can I do that? Nope. Can't really do that either. Why? Because we have a law passed under the Carter administration that says that there's an anti-impoundment protection that says that if Congress budgets the money, you have to actually spend it. You have no choice but to spend it, and not only spend it somewhere, but to spend it in exactly the same administrative agency that was the source of that waste, fraud, and abuse. So, you know what I say is, you might have a generation of Republicans, the Mitt Romneys and the Paul Ryans of the world, who, even back in their, when they were actually, real figures, might have said something like, we're going to save some money by doing this. And I agree with that. I want to eliminate these kinds of managerial overspending sprees because it could save money, which means lower taxes and we stimulate the economy and all that stuff. I'm on board with it. But I think our real reason is not just because we care about the dollar savings. It's because we care about the integrity of a self-governing democratic body politic, a constitutional democracy, a constitutional republic. That's why we actually care about this. Waste, fraud, and abuse is bad, but the real rule of the road is the thing we set into motion in 1776. The idea that whoever we might elect and put in that office, it's the people who we elect as citizens that we want running the government, that we, the people, put into power to run the government, rather than a self-appointed aristocracy, which is the real party that runs the show today. That is what merit in government looks like to me. Now, we can only ever achieve merit in these spheres of our lives, and who gets into the country, who gets ahead in the country, who runs the government, if we also allow meritocracy to thrive and to rule in the marketplace of ideas. The fact that we're even able to have this conversation at an institute like this one is no longer something we can take for granted in this country. The best ideas win when no ideas are censored. Okay, you want to censor the wrong ideas, keep doing that. You know what you're going to find out? Some of those wrong ideas you censored turned out to be the right ones in the end. Just ask Galileo, just ask half the doctors who were talking about the COVID-19 pandemic over the course of the last 3 years. Thank you. It is not just a precondition for truth. I think we live in a moment in America today where free speech is a precondition for peace. If you tell people they cannot speak, that is when they scream. If you tell people they cannot scream, that is when they tear things down. Okay? Free speech isn't what got us January 6th. Free speech might have been one of our ways of preventing it from ever happening again. Now, I don't rail about big tech censorship anymore. I call it what it really is. Government tech censorship.
Crop TV.